Today is December 6th, 2023, and my name is Chris Hume, and I'm an attorney in Mobile, and I'm interviewing John L. Lawler on behalf of the Mobile Bar Association's Archives and History Committee. Before we begin, I would like to formally obtain John's permission to have this interview recorded and transcribed so that it can be preserved, edited, and released in whole or in part by the Mobile Bar Association.
I trust the bar to do the right thing.
And we have your permission.
Yes, you have my permission.
John, what is your age?
I'm 83.
And what year were you admitted to practice by the Alabama State Bar?
1965.
How long have you been practicing?
58 years plus. I'll be 54 in May 5th.
Did you serve in the military?
No, I did not. I reached my 26th birthday before my draft number came in.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
Grew up in Anniston, Alabama. I was born in a little community called Pine, Kentucky in Cleveland County. My grandparents on both sides were farmers. My father's father was a peddler, drove a peddling truck. My mother's father was a farmer, and of course my mother and father grew up on a farm, and they were part of a generation that left the farm and moved to the city, and moved to Anniston, and took jobs and left the farm. Excuse me.
Were any of your family members lawyers?
No, I don't. I had one grandfather who was very active in the church, Kentucky Baptist Church, and always wanted to talk, and he was a favorite of mine. And I think he influenced me with his interest in the community, life in general, and how things worked. He enjoyed his service on the jury from time to time, and looked forward to it because he got a little money. But one of the cases that he served on was the revenue case for making alcohol, which was kind of a popular thing in the community among people. They raised corn, and about the only thing they could do was make whiskey. Well, he served on the jury, the man was convicted, and thereafter his barn was burned. And my mother's stories about that and the hardship that all that caused. I think it influenced me to want to do the right thing, and it may have led to my interest in government and law.
And about how old were you when that barn was burned?
Well, that was when my mother was a girl.
So you heard that story.
I heard that story.
Kind of made you interested in the law.
Well, yes, it made me interested in how the community works, who's in charge, and that sort of thing. And I carried through. When I got to school, I was interested in civics, and I could do the other stuff, but my heart was in the civics.
And you where did you go to high school and college?
Anniston High School, graduated in '58, and I went to the University of Alabama, to law school and undergraduate school.
And what made you, you may have already touched on this, but what made you decide to go to law school? Well,
I'm always interested in government, and I set my sights to begin with. I wanted to go into foreign service, but I soon learned after I got to college that I had absolutely zero ability with the languages. So I nixed that. Gosh, that wouldn't work. I needed that. So then I concentrated on, my plan was to go to law school. I never lost sight of it, and I did. And
what memories of law school do you have? That favorite professor or students' activities? What sticks out?
Well, one of the memories that I have of law school is I remember when George Wallace, the governor, stood in the schoolhouse door. That was the Foster Auditorium, which was just across the way from the law school. I watched that whole event standing on the steps up to the library looking out that way.
Wow.
That's one thing that I remember.
I'm sure you do, that was historic, the law school fair was right across the driveway there, and there's a street right there, and there it is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your early career and legal career, and tell us about your experience looking for your first job.
Well, I was coming to, the end of my senior year in law school, and I was looking for a job. I needed a job, and I've learned that Judge Thomas, Federal Judge Thomas, in Mobile was looking for a clerk. And so I signed up and came down for an interview. And I think the interview occurred on a Thursday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. And after the interview, I was kind of pretty sure that I was not going to be Judge Thomas's clerk. So I walked out of the courthouse and I kind of kicking cans up the street, and I ran into William Carr, an attorney at Mobile. Bill had been out of school, I guess 3 or 4 years, but I had known him in college. And he asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, what we need to do is go and have a drink at the Athelston Club. I knew nothing about the Athelston Club, but I went with him, and we sat down in the bar and ordered a drink, and he told me, he says, in just a minute or two, the biggest lawyer in this city is going to come in. And so I didn't know exactly what to expect, but about that time, Irving J. Langford walked in. Irving was about my height, about 5'8" or 9, and weighed about 400 pounds. He was a big man. And the first thing he did was order 3 vodka tonics, which was kind of shocking to me in a way. But anyway, we chatted for a while, and he asked me why I was, in town. And I said, well, I'm getting out of school. I need a job. He said, well, we've been thinking about hiring somebody. Yes, sir. He said, we've been thinking about hiring somebody, but I'd like to talk to you, but don't come early. He said, I don't come to work early. He said, come at 10 o'clock. So I did, and I met him, and I met T.O. Howell and George Finkbonner. And I didn't meet Tom Johnson. Tom Johnson, the former state senator from Mobile. He was at the Indianapolis 500. So, so they talked with me and invited me to come back so I could meet Tom. Well, I came back and met Tom, and the rest, when we talked, they offered me a job. And of course, I took it. But before I took it, I called a good friend, Ralph Hallberg, who's a lawyer, same age as me, graduated with me. And his father, been Mobile of the Year, really an outstanding member of the bar and the probate lawyer to call on always. He was really Mr. Probate. And I said, well, Ralph, will your dad talk to me and tell me something about these people? He said, I believe he would. So I called, went over to meet with Big Ralph. And he said, John, these folks are good lawyers. They really are. He said, but the size of them, Tom was about 350 anyway. He said, I'm not sure they're going to live too long. But he said, they're also very colorful people. But he says, you won't go wrong if you accept the job. Well, I did. And the job was, I paid a very modest salary. When I say modest, really modest. And I took it and started to work. And after about a month or so, T.O. Howell, who had been a former assistant district attorney, came into my office. He said, John, I got somebody I want you to meet. And so I went around with him, and we met with Carl Booth, who was the district attorney. And he said, Carl tells me that he needs someone to prosecute the state felony preliminary hearings in the police court and handle the state misdemeanors. And he said, I told Carl that you'd be interested in that job. And of course I said, yes, oh yes. And so I took the job, but the catch was I had to give my salary to the firm. They let me keep the taxes. But I look back on my relationship with those guys when I first began. They knew nothing about me. And they gave me a chance. They were good to me. In 4 years, I was a partner. And through that association, I felt I was very successful to have had Jimmy Langford, who was really, really my ideal. He was a great, great lawyer. I mean, he could do common law pleading, nobody else could. And that's the story. We worked on for about 23 years, and then I moved on to part of the firm with Frank Bonner and Steve Olin, and I formed a firm. Tom had died. The old firm was breaking up. Teal was retiring, and so we formed this new association. And I was with them for about 15 years. And then I went on to be solo, sharing office space with Ralph Hallberg for the last 22 years. During that time, all of that time, I was an assistant district attorney for 3 years until Carl was defeated for election.
Let me back up. That was 1965. That's when you graduated from law school.
Right.
That's when you would have had that interview with Judge Thomas.
Right.
Judge Thomas, I clerked with Judge Thomas. I was going to mention an aside because you didn't get the job, right?
No.
Well, Judge Thomas told me one time that he never hired any law clerks that were smarter than him. So that's a loss.
I don't think that was the case.
That's his opinion. Okay. But you talked about your career, but what are some of the, and I believe you told me what your beginning salary was when we met back in the summer.
$350.
And then you were paid, what, $700?
I was paid $700 to be a prosecutor. But the kicker was I had to give that money to the firm.
So
they did let me keep the taxes.
Yeah, they paid the taxes for you, but they covered your salary. That's an interesting story. And what do you remember about when starting out? I know you touched on what you did with Carl Bruce in the district attorney's office. Any other working hours? I mean, what was it like working at?
Well, when I was prosecuting at first, I'd go in at about 7 o'clock and read the files and handle the cases. And that'd be the first time that I met the witnesses, first time I'd seen the reports. And we'd go till about 10 o'clock usually, 10:30. And I would then leave that and I'd go back to the firm and do whatever they had that they wanted me to do.
And your practice specialty, what did you sort of specialize in as you developed your practice? What areas?
Well, after I left the DA when Carl was not reelected, I was a part-time public defender for a year and a half, and I did all those criminal cases. I mean, you get about 8 felonies a month that you'd have to do, and it was very kind of dismal work because, I mean, they had cases where the defendant would be captured in the building and yet refuse to plead guilty. So it was not pleasant work, let's put it that way. And and it was not very, very rewarding because it was just a revolving door and you didn't feel like you were doing much good for anybody. And but anyway, I did that for about a year and a half, and then I had sued the city of Mobile. A tree had fallen on Baraka Street, I think it was, and hurt one of the workers. And I filed a claim, and it was defended by my good friend Bill Brigham, who was a longtime city attorney, and who was serving at that time as the city attorney. And he, after the case, he said, John, if I can get you appointed, would you work as a part-time assistant? I said, well, yeah, I think I would. I'd like that. And I did, and I began, and I remained an assistant city attorney for 41 or 2 years. And during that time, I did everything you can do. I defended the city's workman's compensation program for about 10 years, represented the pension and firefighters pension relief fund board, handled all their zoning matters, planning commission, board of adjustment, and all the litigation that was involved in all that. That took a pretty good bit of my time. I spent probably 50% of my time doing those kind of matters. And it was rewarding because during that time I met a man named Robert Juster. Robert was an architect from England that immigrated to the United States. He had been on several planning commissions around the country. He had taught zoning and planning at college, and he made a disciple of me. He taught me what you can do if you follow the plan. And of course, the city of Mobile has a very good plan, have a very good ordinance. The problem is trying to get the citizens and the politicians and everyone to follow the plan. And I felt that was my role. I felt that not only that I represent whoever appointed me, I didn't represent whoever appointed me. What I did, I felt the citizens of the city of Mobile by extension. And so I looked at it that way, and I worked at it for a long time. I went through several administrations and was able to thread the needle. Most of the time, the politicians didn't want to get involved in the zoning fights because that involved neighbor against neighbor or something like that, and they wanted that to be somebody else's argument, not theirs. But I was able to exert what influence that I could, and I was proud of my work.
And as far as, I know you did some other types of litigation and work when you started out. You were telling me, I think, a wrongful death case when you were with Jimmy Langford Johnson firm, and you were in a deposition. I don't know why. Tell us about that.
Well, no, I don't remember any particular case. Langford was such a good pleader. I mean, he knew the common law pleading. Most lawyers couldn't handle it. And so he built a practice almost out of that. He didn't have any clients walking off the street. His clients were lawyers coming to him with problems. And he would do the pleading. He had an association with M.A. Marsall, very outstanding trial lawyer in Mobile. And Marsall was a great courtroom lawyer, but he was a dismal, poor pleader. You know, he couldn't write. He couldn't write like Langford did. And so they made the association, and I worked together with them, and we worked on those cases for about 15 years, very successful. We do the work, we do the preparation. Bubba would do the theatrics.
Yeah, I don't know, the case that I was thinking of was a wrongful death case, and you were down in Houston or somewhere taking a deposition, and I think, I believe that's correct. Does that ring a bell about Bimini? You were going to, you thought it was a slam dunk, as I recall. Does that ring a bell? Maybe not.
No, I had to handle a case for Langford, one of his wife's relatives, who was accused in the Chickasaw police court of some kind of misdeed. And I was told that I was going to just go and continue it because Jimmy was going to be out of town, and I was just going to appear and make sure that the case was continued. And when I got there, I faced a room full of witnesses, it seemed like, and we had a trial.
So there's more to
that was more than mine.
Yeah.
But my case is, you know, over the years, I was, in my view, a real general practice because municipal law really is a general practice. But other than that, you know, I had one antitrust case early on in my career. I had one civil RICO, which is, you know, that same thing Trump was charged with this under the civil RICO. Well, I had one of those cases where I represented a defendant, Robert Smith and I. Robert represented one of the defendants and I represented the other.
And the courthouse, when you first started practicing in 1965, now we have a new courthouse, but the one that was a predecessor that was there when I started was a very old, had it already been taken down, I guess, in 1965?
Yes, it had. The first visit I made to the courthouse was in what was quote the new courthouse.
Then the new courthouse.
Yeah, then the new courthouse.
Was it all, did everybody smoke in the hall back in the, when you first started?
Oh, yeah, and during that time, Sparkman was running for reelection. And I had been asked, to work in his campaign by Arthur Smith, a good friend of mine. And Arthur was a realtor here in town, and he asked me if I would work in the campaign, and would I go up to Butler, I'm not Butler, to Chatham, to make a speech to their jury assembly on behalf of Senator Sparkman. So I went up there. Well, Sparkman was not real popular up there. But one of the things that I saw when I walked into the courtroom was there was a sign on the wall that said, "Don't put your butts out in the floor." Everybody smoked.
Everybody smoked, yeah, that's true. What lawyers did you enjoy working with or against in particular while you were practicing?
I particularly enjoyed working with Fred Collins, who's a longtime city attorney and probably, in my view, one of the best municipal lawyers ever. He had the capacity to find yes. In other words, it's so easy in governmental matters for the lawyer to say no, and you can't do that. He could find a way to do it. He could lead his clients to yes. He shared that trait with Irving Langford, my mentor. Jimmy could find a way to get to yes and not always say no. And Booth was good. Booth, he was not hovering over me. He just told me, he said, John, this is like, he referred to Ned and the first reader. He said, that's what you got to do. He said, you got to make sure that you cover all the points. Make your argument, sit down. He was a very good boss in that he didn't try to hover over me. And the same was true of Fred. And Fred always said, John, you need any help, call me. Otherwise, it's yours. And those lawyers. And of course, I had the good counsel of my partners too. Tom Johnson, he'd been a former United States, but a state senator, very interested in politics. And I was interested too because of my friendship with Donald Stewart, my high school buddy. We grew up in Anniston together, and I worked in his campaign when he ran for U.S. Senate for Jim Allen's unexpired term. And I've worked with him since that time in a number of cases that he has filed for, toxic chlor. We had a Monsanto case over Pensacola, and we've had others. We had the IP case, the Africa Town case, represented in that case. So I've been in that. I've covered the spectrum, but I don't, I looked to Mr. Thornton, Ed Thornton, who was a real leader of the bar when I began, and I talked to Ed from time to time in the steam room at the Halsted Club. And Ed told me, he said, John, if you can read and have any sense, you can do most anything. And he cut across all things too. I haven't done everything. I never did try to do any tax. But other things, I've done pretty much all of
Right. And as far as the judges, what judges best, toughest, or that's something you don't want to talk about, but any particular judges stick out in your mind?
Well, the gentleman on the wall here, Judge Hockland, was one of my favorites. Judge Hockland, This Atlanta he was in control of the courtroom, treated everybody the same, and he was a very practical person. I remember one case when I was prosecuting. No, I was defending, and I had this guy charged. And that was at a time when the scenario you went through on the plea was that you couldn't tell, the defendant was not to know what he was going to get. And we all went through the charade that he didn't know. But of course, to keep the docket moving, we made deals and everybody knew. So, this guy was supposed to get 2 years. And so I went through the questions with him. The judge asked me the questions, and now, any reason why the sentence of law shouldn't be passed on you? And of course, the gentleman said no. And then the judge said, well, I sentence you to 4 years in the penitentiary. Take him away. And he started walking away with me. And I said, but judge. And he said, sit down, Mr. Lawler. And I took him away. And then I sat down. And then a little time passed. I had another couple of pleas. And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Lawler, I think that there was something that you wanted to bring before the court about your case. Is there some motion that you want to make? And I said, well, yes, sir. I said, I would like for you to reconsider the sentence. He said, I've thought about that, Mr. Lawler, and I agree with you. I think I acted a little hastily there. He said, I sentenced him to 1 year and a day. So I saved him 1 year.
That's great. Well, I know you've been practicing for 58 years. What is how has the practice of law changed the most since you started your career?
Well, it's changed dramatically it's been changed dramatically by advertising. When I began practice, I was instructed by the lawyers that I worked with, if you'll do a good job, you'll get referrals from your client, or you'll get referrals from people who actually saw you in court working. That's the way you build your business. You couldn't advertise. Like I remember one time Joe Boswell, who was admitted at the same time I was, had inadvertently left a business card in his shirt at the laundry. And somehow that wound up with a complaint before the grievance committee for the Mobile Bar. And it was strict. You couldn't put you're supposed to put your name on, you couldn't put your name in, big lights. You had to have just very small on a directory in a bank building was what was envisioned. So there was no advertising at all. I mean, you got your business by referrals from other people. And now, of course, people, we're governed, in my humble opinion, by the television. And, people that are seen on television are viewed as important people. And this guy comes on and says, one call, that's all. Or, we're the biggest law firm in the world. Things like those kind of things, it gets people in because these people have been very, very successful. And what they're handling is, primarily this automobile accident litigation. And before all that happened, which has concentrated those cases and those few firms that advertise, that have the money. I mean, to get into that business now, you'd need $1 million to get name identification. But the ones that are in it are in control of it. And it's just, they're handling something, these automobile accident cases. You need a lawyer. I'm not trying to say you don't need a lawyer. What I'm saying is, any journeyman lawyer can handle those cases. And there's, all this hype about that's just not, it's not right, but it's not right, in my opinion, it's not right. And I'm very much opposed to advertising. I think it's destroyed any respect or that the lawyers enjoy. The lawyers were looked upon as leaders of the community. The way you got ahead was you joined the JCs or some civic club, or you were on the vestry at your church. You did those kind of things. You got known as a person who was concerned about the community. and who was concerned about people. And on the basis of that, you developed a practice. But now it's made on the basis of a television commercial. I think that's wrong, and I think it's been hurtful to the practice.
Well, what other, well, there's, of course, there've been a lot of technological changes since you,
Right.
started, not related to the advertising, but, faxes, emails, the internet, all that. I mean, that's totally, when you started practicing, we didn't have any of those.
Well, what that has done to us is the technological advances, is the email and what do you call them, the text, that sort of thing. It's taken out the personal relationship that the lawyers had with the courts, with the clerks. And it's done that, you know, to us, to society in general, in my opinion. I mean, you can't talk to a person. You can't, you know, if you can't talk to the clerk, if you can't talk, you're missing something. And it's so hard to express, you know, you need to be real careful when you write a letter. Because and make sure it expresses what you want. And you can do that in a letter. But you can't do it in a text. And all this hurried communication, it's bound to be mistakes. And, you know, the first thing I tell my clients, you know, I've done some domestic practice, not a lot. But the first thing I tell them, I said, look, please let me do the talking. You don't talk. Let's don't get into that. Well, invariably, they get on Facebook. As it turns out, the other side, they know more about the case than I do. You know?
Right. And texting, and you can't pull those back sometimes that you maybe, or emails, your instant response, folks looking for an immediate reply, that type of thing.
Well, and as a judge, Rick Cox told me, he was a federal district judge here in Mobile, and about my age group, he's a little older than I. But he told me we went to church together and often talked about the practice. He said, you know, what has happened is the motion document is coming out, and he said the day before, only hours before the argument, I get served with something like a Sears Roebuck catalog that has every case that's ever been decided in the world on the issue. And he says, that's unfair to me because I don't have time to read it. And it's unfair to the clients because it's not the way to practice law. But it's done that, and it's done to a lot of gamesmanship, you know, because people wait till the very last minute. And of course, with the ability to file over the weekend, you can file at midnight on Sunday, you know, for something that's going to be heard on Monday. And it just, you know, and I'm in a case right now where that's happened. And you know, we get to the court and my friend Donald Stewart, that I'm in the case with, he's coming down for argument. An amendment, a brief is filed while he's on his way. I didn't see it till he got to court. You know, and of course that resulted in what? It resulted in a continuance so we could answer. And
that's the way things have evolved.
right. Well, and it's also made us the sheer number of laws. You know, let's face it, there are too many of us.
Well, approximately how many lawyers were practicing at the Mobile Bar when you first started in 1965?
250.
And I think there were about 430 when I started in 73. So, you know, now we have well over 1,200 or so more than that.
1,200 members and probably 400.
Well, actually, it's 1,200 practicing attorneys in Mobile County, and we have close to 1,100 members.
All right.
Okay.
So a lot more.
Yeah.
Speaking of local bar, I know what positions have you had with the local Mobile bar or the state bar?
I was president of the young lawyers, that's the lawyers under 35. And I did that, and I served on a couple of committees, but I didn't really get as involved in that perhaps I should have, I don't know, I just didn't for one reason or another. I said I was busy, maybe that was it, but I didn't.
And as far as, I don't know, extracurricular legal activities, I don't know if that includes politics, but I know you have been involved in politics, so.
Well, I've been involved with my friend Stewart over the years. And he was in the state legislature, and like I said earlier, he ran for and was elected to the unexpired term of John Allen, who died in office and served in the U.S. Senate from 78 until 80. And then Admiral Denton was elected. But I worked with him, and I've been interested, in politics always, really. I saw it as a vehicle where we could get some things done, hopefully. And but I never did, as I said, I never had the courage to run myself. I worked in some campaigns though, and I worked in some local campaigns. I always supported the winning mayor until the last one.
Well, how would you describe your work habits?
Well, my work habits now are different than they were earlier. I really put in an awful lot of time. I was at the police court at 7 o'clock, and I went to my firm, and then I worked, go late many times, and I had a real work ethic at that time. And over the years, I think I've been true to it. I come in usually early, say 8 o'clock. But in the last, well, as they say, 40, 50, 60, and 70 were just another day. But when I turned 80, that was indeed a day. You can say a lot of things about being 80 being 70 being the new 60 or whatever, but 80 is not new anything. Well, I've changed my habits with that. I go in about 9:30 and leave at about 4:30 usually.
Well, it's still a pretty good day's work, that's for sure. And you maintain that work ethic throughout your practice, having you work hard. What does it mean to you to be a lawyer?
Well, I had hoped, in the work that I've done, I represented the city and the zoning and land use, and that was something that really piqued my interest because I could see that was a way that we could plan a better community. And I wanted to have some influence on that, and I felt that from time to time I did. I also represented the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, in the city of Orange Beach for about 20 years. And I represented the Convention and Visitors Bureau over in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach for 20 or more years. And all those things were public, you had a public client. You had the public as a client. You were trying to get tourists to come to Gulf Shores, or you were trying to get trying to get Orange Beach planning done in a logical way. Unfortunately, we've probably done things the American way. The American way really is to develop, blight, and then move on and develop again. And the problem is we're running out of land. We can't have that option. And so zoning has become really an important thing, and it was important to me. And I hopefully have had something that was positive to do with that, and I'm interested in seeing that because it's good. You don't put all the bad stuff against this community or that community. You try to be careful about what you do so that everyone's property rights are protected.
And what do you consider your greatest achievement as a lawyer?
My achievement as a lawyer?
That's a tough question.
That's hard. I don't know. You know, like you say, like, as I say, I really enjoyed my representation of my public clients more than I did, my representation of individual clients. Because I felt that I was in a better position to influence and make sure that we did things the right way. And so often, you know, people want you to do something that's contrary to what the facts really are, that sort of thing, you know. And I look at it this way. I want, I haven't represented Snow White all my life, but I look at it like, I want to do everything I can for you to help you within the framework of the law, but I'm not going to help you try to subvert it. And that was sort of my mantra. I mean, I think that certainly I'm not alone in feeling that way. I think that's the way many lawyers feel when they get into practice. But as I said earlier, advertising and the loss of community that we have now is something that's really a problem in our society. And it's something that lawyers can have something to do with, and I hope that I had something to do with that myself.
What advice would you have for young lawyers starting out now?
I think that it would be good to first seek some kind of public employment, either part-time or full-time, or look to something like that. I think so. I mean, not only would you learn how to practice, but you would also have an opportunity to make a contribution
And
to society as a whole.
one of the things that we haven't talked about is your family, and you're married, correct? And your wife, what's your
Yeah,
wife's
my wife's Jean. She's a Judson graduate. We met in college on a blind date. And she has been involved with me. She was Stewart's field representative in Mobile for 2 years when he was in the U.S. Senate. And she's been involved in the various political campaigns. She's always our best politician because she's like her father was. She has just a remarkable memory for names. So when Stewart would come to town, we were campaigning, she was walking right with him. And as the people would come forward, she would tell him who they were and when they had met.
That's remarkable.
And he'd take it from her. All right, she was a great campaigner.
And what about your children?
My son, John Parrish, is a director of trade and development for the Port Authority. And he travels a lot and promotes the city of Mobile, the port. And my young son works for Jennings. I say they're young, they're 50 and 52 and 42, I think. Jennings works for a steamship agency here in town, and they work with logistics and getting ships in and out. But both, like me, are very, I didn't grow up here, but they did, and they're very interested in Mobile and its progress, and I'm proud of them for having that.
Absolutely. What other areas outside the practice of law which you enjoy or been important to you over the years?
Well, that's a hard question too, because I really haven't done a lot. I played a few rounds of golf, and I was going to play. I'm a member of the country club, but I don't golf, which is kind of foolishness, I think. But anyway, I don't. And I've always been going to do. I was going to do this, I was going to do that. But I've been fishing, I was going to go fishing. I used to go on an annual trip. I did do that. But I never really developed anything that really just captured me other than the work.
And so your work life now has mostly been work.
Right.
Hobbies.
Well, that and I enjoy travel, and I enjoy meeting and learning about new people and new places. I'm working on what is a case that I represented a group of Buddhists down on Dog River. We wanted to build a little temple or meeting area for 30 people. The city of Mobile turned them down. And that has been in court now for 8 years. We finally got a verdict. We won. They can do it. And that was very, very important to me. That was, if I had to name a case, I would say that was the most important case that I handled, because I could find no reason, and apparently finally the court could find no reason why they should have been denied when there was a little Baptist church only a half mile down the road that enjoyed the church.
Well, if you could do it all over again, 58 years or so on the approximately 58. What would you do differently if there was, is there anything that you would do?
Well, I don't know. I had the opportunity to, I was offered the opportunity of being the U.S. attorney one time. And I was offered a job as a magistrate, federal magistrate. And I thought about that, but I didn't. I was with the firm then, I was with Langford then, and I had ideas that I would develop in a different direction. And I thought about it and I didn't do it. Now that's something that I think perhaps maybe, like the road not taken, you don't know. I wonder what would have happened to me if I'd been the U.S. attorney for 4 or 8 years, or if I'd been a magistrate for however long they are. I think they're 12-year appointments, but once you take that, I mean, you're out of the practice for sure. But I don't know.
Well, your career, well, John, it's been a pleasure interviewing you today, and your career's not over. It's still
Well, I think I'll be through. I can't say that I'll be through in the end of 24.
okay. Well, we'll see. Maybe not. All right. Thank you, John.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. All right.